The time is upon us, of course, to kick off my 5 reviews of the new cars in Gran Turismo 7 1.31, aka the March update, and what better place to start than with, you could argue, the most significant new addition of the 5 in terms of racing categories, the Group 2, but in particular, DTM spec Audi RS5 Turbo. 2-litre turbo engine. The weight is incredibly low on this car. It's lighter than, for example, the Nissan R390 used to be in the GT1 class in the older Gran Turismo games, 986 kilos, and with 603 horsepower stock. Thanks to a turbo, you can get it up around 850. Those are some really nice numbers to be working with. In fact, in some cases, those are borderline Group 1 numbers. Now, for that price tag of 1 million credits, it might be a little bit more than some people were hoping for or expecting. Personally, I have no issue with that price at all. I think it's more than worth it in terms of significance and its ability on the track, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's also a lot cheaper than a couple of the other Group 2 cars. Historically speaking, of course, the Mercedes and the McLaren are way more expensive than this, and even against the other Group 2s in the much more applicable Super GT categories, the GT500s, it's not that much of a difference in price. You know, 1 million credits in Gran Turismo is nothing. You can get that in no time. So what is it like in practice? Well, with the addition of DRS, the swappable rear wing, you have that little bit of extra flair to play with, and for me, as I alluded to in my review yesterday of the whole update, I love this thing. I was already a huge fan of the Red Bull liveried 2004, I believe it was, Audi A4 DTM touring car in the older games, and just touring cars in general have always had such a strong presence in Gran Turismo games, and they're always really good. One of the key advantages which they often have is that they're so competitive despite having no way near the power of a prototype or a GT1, and yet they're so quick through corners that they more than make up for it, not necessarily to beat, you know, Toyota GT1s and that kind of thing, but they are deceptively quick cars because they're so good through corners. And in newer times, I mean, just look at how quick already the Group 2 machines are. Compare the earlier 2000s ones, which we have like the Lexus SC430, and then just look at the vast difference in performance that happened with the later GT500s that we have. The advances in suspension, aero, tyres, these tangible differences that you can see in lap times between them. And for me, this is exactly what has happened here. The original touring cars, the ones which we still have, like the OGs, like the Alfa 155, they're really good. The Alfa is a fantastic car, but when you compare it side by side to this, you really can immediately feel how time waits for no one when it comes to racing progress. They are so rapid. This car is basically a open-wheel Formula car, in effect, with a silhouette body strapped over the top. That's essentially what DTM cars feel like these days. You sit super low in the car, they look fantastic. Of course, it's a superb choice of car for livery bases and replicas, and there are so many to choose from, both from older games and in real life as well. But in terms of what it can do, it has that little bit of slip-slidiness which, let's be honest, most race cars will have if you really floor it out of a corner, especially a really tight low-speed corner, but overall, it honestly is a pleasure to work with. I easily like this more than any of the GT500 cars, and not purely because of what it can do, but I also just find it a more interesting car. The Japanese ones are great, but this is just, it's such an unintentional throwback to Gran Turismo's earlier days, because it's not a returning car, of course, but it almost feels like one. And it also, I think it might be playing on my nostalgia for Test Drive Unlimited, because for those who played that may remember that one of the very strange choices of DLC car was also an Audi A4 DTM, and it was just a beast of a car to use. This is kind of playing on those member berries for me, I think, and I really like seeing it in the game. I would of course love to see more. The Aston would be a fantastic choice and such a unique one, but even if this is the only one that we get, it is a very good car. Now standard, the points are 812, and of course that will tend to change with new updates, especially such as this month. It's changed a number of other cars, so who knows what could happen in future, and obviously in actual racing scenarios, chances are balance of performance is going to change a lot of things depending on how they set it up, be it an online race or sport mode. So under those circumstances, really anything can change, but overall I'm really happy with this car. In fact, I like all 5 cars in one form or another of this update, but this one, as I mentioned at the start, is probably the standout. It might not be the car that I end up using the most, but it is the one that has that immediate, glaring, eye-catching significance, and I actually believe it lives up to it. It's not a car that you're going to get into and be disappointed by, I don't think. And for those who maybe are disappointed, I would love to hear in the comments why you were. Maybe you had like Scudo, Pikes Peak expectations for it or something, I don't know. But if by some chance somebody is disappointed, I'd love to hear the reasoning on why. For me, it's a fantastic car, and there's really not much else to say about it without repeating myself. So ultimately, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you haven't bought it yet, maybe if you haven't booted up the game in a while, do you intend to do it for a car like this? If you are on the game, if you've bought it already, what are your thoughts? Have you, for example, started using it for a certain event or for a certain track? Have you found it to be particularly good for something, or found an interesting quirk about the car, maybe aside from the DRS? And for those who are wondering, you can of course use the DRS with the same button as NOS, or the wing deployment on the Tomahawk. So overall, that's it for my thoughts on the touring car, the Audi RS5 Turbo DTM. I really do hope that we get more DTM cars, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And of course, stick around over the next 4 days for my reviews of the other vehicles. And like I said, give me your thoughts on the car down below. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.